Imagine a place where the untold stories of Black missionaries are amplified, honored, and celebrated. A place that bridges the legacy of the people of the Way with the powerful missions work of today's African diaspora. Welcome to the Black Missions Museum, a digital project dedicated to preserving the voices, culture, and legacy of Black missionaries across the globe. But we need your help to bring this vision to life. Your support makes a difference. Join us in this mission by donating today. Just click the link in the show notes to give and be a part of history. Together, we can inspire future generations and keep the legacy alive. At Elevate One Consulting, we specialize in executive, business, and accountability coaching tailored just for you. Discover the power of enhanced leadership skills, improved performance, and increased self-awareness. Our expert coaches will help you navigate challenges, articulate your vision, and establish a work-life balance. With Elevate One Consulting, you get proven methodologies to drive growth and success, insightful feedback and personalized strategies, clear goals, and actionable plans. Whether you're a C-suite executive, business owner, or entrepreneur, our coaching programs are designed to help you thrive. Visit www.elevateoneconsulting.com and take your first steps towards a focused future. Elevate One Consulting. Innovate, grow, elevate. Welcome back to The Unbroken Place, where it begins and ends with empathy. I'm your host, Eddie Paul Thomas, and before we dive into today's topic, I just want to really express my thanks and gratitude to all of you who have reached out. If you don't know, it's your first time listening to the show, we are coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina, which was recently hit by a huge hurricane. In fact, as we are recording today, Florida has been hit with another hurricane, Milton here, and having family here in the Carolinas and even down into Florida, it's just been a rough time. So I'm grateful to all of you. We are fine, Charlotte. For some reason, we rest in this, the southern part of Charlotte, which is basically on the border of North Carolina and South Carolina. We have been fortunate for the entire time that we've been here to, get the rains and the winds and everything, the massive storms, but it just kind of passes over us without any damage. And this was the case again for us. But the reality is that literally just 30 minutes to our west, towns that we visited, places where we have friends that live now, places like Asheville, were completely decimated. The Biltmore, which is a monument in that area, to that town was almost entirely underwater. I believe they said it was up to 24 feet deep in some areas over there. So there are a lot of people who are still hurting and in need of your prayers and support, good vibes. And at the end of the show, please take some time in our show notes. We'll have different ways to connect and give and just help people who are going to be dealing with some really hardcore devastation, not just for a few weeks or for a few months. Many estimates are that it's going to take years, even with all the federal funding and FEMA and everyone who've been jumping in to try and help. It's just going to take a long time for our neighbors to the west to get back on their feet. That kind of leads me into today's topic, which I think is a very important one. The topic that we're discussing today is the difference between seeing and observing, and the two are not necessarily the same. For me, it's personal, not just because of what we've gone through, but because the difference between seeing and observing is why I ended up in the hospital last year. I was going down some steps and I knew that they were steps, but I did not observe. I saw that there were steps, but I did not observe that there was one extra step that I missed and ended up tumbling down the steps and tearing up my knee and had to have surgery for it. And for me, yeah, the surgery was hard and the recovery was hard, but it wasn't life-threatening. But in some cases it can be for people. And so taking that time to really dig in on things that are very important to us is incredibly important. As an example for the difference between taking the time to observe something as opposed to seeing, I'll use a client example. I had a client who once wanted me to build this massive website because they had seen some of their competitors and thought, ooh, that website looks really slick. I love this functionality. I love how they did this with their videos and their graphics. I really want you to hook us up with what they have, but just put our branding on it. Okay, well, let's talk through it. So we took the time. I was working on this massive project and went to lay out the wireframe, which if you're not familiar what that is, it's kind of like building the frame of your house, where the rooms are going to be, where you're going to put your electric, where the tubs and all that stuff are going to go before you actually start building. And when you do it well, when you have a website that you've taken the time to really lay out, it can take a little bit of time. It's not just a quick deal. You snap your fingers and it's over with. Well, this client wanted to take what should have been about a 3-month project and cut it down to a month. And they told me literally cut corners. If you need to, we just need this thing. We want it and people are going to love it. Well, the result was bad. It was pretty bad. A lot of customers complained about their end user experience. They wanted refunds for their purchases. They couldn't quite understand what some of the products were. And as a result, they had to put a halt on sales and come back to me and ask me to help them put this thing back together again. And simply because they didn't want to take the time to observe and really take in what was needed to have a successful experience. Well, we see this all the time, not just in business, just in terms of taking the time to observe and understand what is really needed in order to move forward in a given area. We can almost, in some cases, even experience short-term gains, but they end up in giving us long-term losses. Quite frankly, nowhere has this been more prevalent for me than in this current election cycle. And not so much from the politicians, because at this point, we know how it works. As functioning adults, we know one group is going to say one thing and the other is going to say another, and we're going to gravitate towards where we gravitate. But that's not how it ends. We, the people, carry it on. And when you look at our behavior online in particular, you can see how some of these behaviors, based on our political affiliations, end up impacting people in real ways. Whether it's Haitian immigrants in the Midwest needing to evacuate buildings because of bomb threats or shooting threats, or in North Carolina, in the Carolinas, where people were spreading lies about what FEMA was doing and not getting money to us, despite what, local officials are saying. Hey, things are going well, even though we're struggling, the systems are working. So these lies are not helping, they're actually hurting. And as I kind of sat back, and because I wanted to do a show last week, to connect with everyone and, just kind of explain where we are, how things are going. I wanted to take time, and it's been a practice of mine that I'd love to kind of share with everyone today. And it started with understanding a quote. There's a father of sociobiology that I read every once in a while. That's his nickname, E.O. Wilson. He has this quote. Now I'll read it off for you. The real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. Let that one sink in for just a moment as you think about this, because what he's saying is that we have this paradox that while humans have evolved with these ancient brains and structures, we now possess technology that has immense power and that leaves us out of alignment. So when you have these supercharged technologies with a set of emotions that aren't quite matching the level of that technology, it leads to something that really tends to take off. And that is that lies particularly sensational or charged content, spread faster on social media than the truth. And we, you and I, the listener of the show, the watcher of the show, if you're on YouTube, we are the ones who do it. And so as you look at why this thing happens, there are a few psychological things that are happening for each of us. There's emotional engagement that's going on. So false information often triggers stronger emotional reactions. Surprise, fear, anger. Those things are triggers for us as people, almost fight or flight when it comes to us seeing something on social media or hearing or reading something on social media. And it prompts a response out of us. The next would be the novelty or shock value of the information. So lies or misinformation often contain elements of surprise or controversy that make them more attention grabbing than factual or mundane truths. And so as you kind of think about the things that catch your attention on social media, are those things that are bringing you peace? Are those things that are simply just providing you the information of what's going on? Or are they in big, bold, red print? So-and-so does this. The scandal of this guy is going on. And all of those things that are happening are meant to shock us, like make you stop and pause to read and watch the information. If you've watched over the last couple of years any of the Senate hearings on what social media is doing, one of the concerns was algorithmic amplification. So social media platforms are designed to prioritize engagement, meaning that content gets more likes or shares or comments, when it's a little more controversial. But when the algorithm sees that there's more engagement, it boosts that content. So when you're thinking about the false or exaggerated stories that we often see or hear on social media, they evoke more reaction, as we were talking about before, and spread a little bit faster, not just because of the emotional attachment, but because the algorithm helps spread this. The fourth thing that we're dealing with in terms of why lies spread a little faster than truth on social media is that humans are more prone to confirmation bias, which means they're more likely to believe and share information that aligns with their pre-existing beliefs. False information often exploits these biases, and you'll see it when it comes in, and we'll just stick with politics for a second. You'll see it in the strategies of the politicians. They will make plain in their strategy, this is who we're going after, and this is what we're going to use to get them fired up. Doesn't matter if it's necessarily, factual or not. And so when you look at the types of things that one political party will put out versus the other, they're going to put things out that reinforce your worldviews, and oftentimes will either exaggerate or flat out lie because they're counting on you not taking the time to fact check. The last of these is, as we're looking at it, and I've seen this in conversations, and if you've hung out with me any more than 5 minutes, we end up eventually talking somewhat about my book, A Broken Seat at the Table, is simplification. Misinformation often tries to simplify very complex issues. They utilize a laying out of the logic and easy to understand narratives, making it super digestible and shareable, but there's more nuance than the story is actually there. So one of the reasons why I don't dig into or really get into the debates is because each side will super oversimplify an answer simply to make it easier for you to understand, but that's not always truthful. You can name any topic that we're dealing with when it comes to politics. They're often multi-layered and complex, and there are ways in which we can digest that information, but it's never going to come from a political party that we get all of the information specifically. Now, in terms of proof, if you are someone who listens to me or reads anything that I write, you'll understand that I love having data at my side so that we can talk about this and show, hey, these aren't just Eddie's opinions or ways in which I want to just get my point of view across. I actually take time and look at the data. What are the studies saying? What are experts in these areas talking about, and what are they saying? One of the most widely cited case studies on this topic came from a 2018 paper published in Science by researchers from MIT, or the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which analyzed the spread of true and false information on Twitter. And here's some very key findings for you. And after listening to this, you may be inclined to hop off of Twitter, something I did a while back. So just to give you the scope here, the researchers analyzed the spread of 126,000 stories tweeted by 3 million people over the span of 11 years from 2006 to 2017. The stories were classified as true or false using 6 independent fact-checking organizations. And so here were some of the key findings. I'm going to list these off here for you. Number 1, falsehoods spread faster. False news stories reached 1,500 people 6 times faster on average than true stories. Wider reach. False information was 70% more likely to be retweeted than true information. Emotional impact. False stories were more novel than true ones, which likely contributed to their rapid spread. They often triggered stronger emotional responses such as surprise, disgust, and fear compared to the more neutral or analytical emotions elicited by true stories. No bots required. Interestingly, and this is one that I found very interesting as someone who's worked in marketing communications for a long time, the study found that bots, automated accounts, amplified both true and false stories equally. This indicates that human users, not bots, were primarily responsible for the faster spread of false news. And then the third of these is focus on specific categories. False information was especially prevalent in categories such as politics, urban legends, and financial information. Political falsehoods spread the fastest of all categories, underscoring the role of misinformation in shaping public opinion. So as you look at that, we've kind of got a figure on why they spread faster. But what are some of the impacts? And this is where I would love everyone to pay just a little bit closer attention to what I'm sharing. The first area is desensitization and emotional manipulation. When you receive all of this content, especially the false content, there's an overload of sensational content. Constant exposure to shocking false information can lead to emotional burnout, where people become numb to the suffering of others. It reduces their ability to empathize over time because their emotional responses are worn out by repeated and often exaggerated claims. So think about it this way. If you're listening to this show and you were born in 2010 or a little bit before, you're probably not going to get this. But those of you in Gen X, or maybe a little younger than me, you can probably think back to where there were no outlets for social media. It was usually the news or radio or even, God forbid, a paper. And you got that information in small bites, but then you went back to your life. You weren't attached to your phone all the time. You didn't spend hours on social media. The news had its first local hour, and then it did its hour for the national news. And so we were taking in information maybe 3 to 4 hours a day max outside of our jobs or school. So we weren't overloaded with all of these stories. But now, literally, there are people looking at their phones for 8-10 hours a day, looking at information on social media, and you see injustice after injustice or disaster after disaster. someone committing a crime after another person committing a crime. And so you become desensitized to the impacts of what's happening to individuals. So another thing to think about is the manipulation of your emotions. False information often preys on strong emotions like fear or anger or outrage. When these emotions are constantly triggered, it can distort a person's sense of empathy, causing them to react emotionally to falsehoods and reducing their capacity for rational, compassionate responses to genuine situations of need or suffering. The next category would be the erosion of truth and eventually cynicism. You start to, and you'll see this over and over and over. There are historical accounts of this over and over where people start to distrust information. When lies spread faster than truth, it creates an environment where people struggle to distinguish between fact and fiction. They start to gravitate towards conspiracy, even when the facts are right in front of them. It leads to distrust of news, information sources, even in other people. When that trust is eroded, empathy obviously suffers. It becomes harder to connect with others or care about their experiences, or create a natural division between political sides, where it's hard to find common ground on almost anything. What comes next after that is really polarization and empathy gaps. There's a reinforcement of tribalism. Misinformation often fuels polarization by amplifying divisive narratives. When false stories reinforce existing biases or stoke fear, people can become more entrenched in their in-group mentality, empathizing only with those who share their views or their values. We've seen this, as mentioned just a little while ago. What happened in Ohio, Springfield, the biases that exist for immigrants in this country, and particularly Black immigrants, were reinforced with a lie, and it stoked fear, and people became out of control with what they believed was real about people who were invited to be a part of that community. Which goes to the last part of this particular section. Misinformation usually targets specific groups. False information often demonizes certain groups of individuals, which can foster prejudice and diminish empathy towards those groups. When people are consistently fed lies about others, they may view them through the lens of fear or distrust, making it difficult to empathize with their struggles or experiences. Lastly, in terms of the impact of these lies that spread faster than truth on social media, it decreases active listening. Social media's fast-paced environment and misinformation overload encourage quick, reactive responses rather than thoughtful, compassionate engagement. That is what the platforms are built for. This can lead to a decline in active listening, which is essential for empathy. People may be more focused on reacting to the latest sensational claim than on genuinely listening to others, understanding their perspectives, their actual experience versus the story you heard. It also hinders constructive dialogue. When people are caught up more in misinformation, it becomes more difficult to engage in meaningful, empathetic conversations. If someone believes a false narrative, it may cloud their judgment, making it harder for them to empathize with others who hold a different or even more accurate viewpoint. It leads to a breakdown in communication, and it reduces opportunities for understanding and connection. The challenge of combating misinformation and fostering empathy becomes more pressing because emotions are running higher and divisions are manufactured right in front of you. How do we fight this? Well, here are a few ideas. Let's promote digital literacy and critical thinking, not in a condescending way, not in a dehumanizing way, but encourage people when it comes to political fact checking. Let's use resources, ones that are credible, ones that we can all kind of agree on and look at the facts. Personally, I like factcheck.org, PolitiFact, even the Associated Press offers some fact checking tools that allow us to have a common or realistic understanding of what's going on with any given topic in the next few weeks here. The next would be empathy-driven digital environments. These are ones that you can create. And I tell you, if you're in it to have constructive conversations about a given topic that's going on, you want genuine conversations, make your statement on the social media platform of your choice. But let people know after you've made your statement and you're asking for people to engage, to let them know that anything that is derogatory or divisive, you're just going to delete. I've done it before on several platforms and let people know, hey, this is a constructive conversation. If you can't abide by that, I'm not going to let trolls be a part of this conversation. And I've had some decent conversations with people who have very different political ideologies than me, where we were able to find points of common ground. We weren't going to find a lot because some of their viewpoints were pretty extreme, in my opinion, but we could at least find some common ground that allows us to speak human to human as opposed to opponent versus opponent. And next, you can encourage people to highlight political issues with empathy. Encourage influencers that you follow or connect with, politicians and media outlets, to frame political issues from a human-centered perspective. Sharing stories about how policies impact real people can help shift the conversation from these abstract ideologies to human experience and fostering empathy for those affected. As hard as this may seem, the next one would be support nonpartisan voices. Encourage followers to seek out and amplify the work of nonpartisan political analysts and organizations that focus on bridging the divides. These are the voices that are more thoughtful, that have longer engagement, that have longer conversation. And by doing this, seeking out those who have more realistic voices, and I'm not talking about centrist voices. You can have speakers from any party or representatives from any party who are able to present their conversation in a way that doesn't dehumanize others. By amplifying these voices, sharing their content versus getting on and arguing with someone else you don't agree with, you actually don't help amplify the voices you agree with, because they're counting on you engaging and arguing and fighting because it gives them more visibility. That's how the game works for social media. One of the things that you can do to really help yourself detox a little bit over the next month as we get closer and closer to the day we get to cast our ballots is to take a little sabbatical from social media. Take regular breaks. I know that some of us want to go on and share stories about what our family are doing, or this really cool trip, or this amazing award that we won, or whatever it is that you have going on in your life. That's fine. That's great. Go on and share with the world. But take a break from those things that are actively causing you to deal with that anxiety or that anger or that rage when you see something that you know is false. Take a break. Step back, take a breath, turn off your screen, and move on. At this point, we should all have a good idea of who we're voting for. I don't think it does us any good to continue arguing up until the day. I hope that you find some of this helpful. In no way do I want you to take what I'm saying as, you should be anti-political. You shouldn't talk about politics. Not in the least. Politics are an everyday thing for me. They are a part of my life, and I have to figure out from time to time when to step back, especially online. And my hope is that as you heard some of the information that I shared today, you start to evaluate where you are. Are you to that point where you are so engaged that you're giving yourself anxiety, that it's starting to impact your conversations with family or friends or in your community or at work? Do a little self-assessment. And if you can, take a break. Take a break. It's not necessary when you already know what you're fighting for, at least online. Till next time, one love. The Unbroken Place podcast is presented by Elevate One Consulting. The show is produced by Say Something Studios. Learn more about both of these in the show notes. The show's music is performed by Little Glass Men and Captive Portal. We want to thank you for being a part of the Unbroken Place community. Look for an ongoing conversation on Instagram and Facebook at the handle @UnbrokenPlace. You can also find some helpful resources at eddiepaulthomas.com. Make sure to sign up for our newsletter called OK on Second Thought on LinkedIn. Until next time, one love. Revitalize your brand and accelerate your impact with Eddie and Erica at Elevate One Consulting. Experts in organizational development, digital marketing, and much more. From leadership coaching to creating unforgettable digital experiences, we've got you covered. Visit elevateoneconsulting.com today. Elevate One Consulting. Innovate, grow, elevate. Say Something Studios.